All right, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has stated that Beijing hopes the United States will meet it halfway in order to stabilize ties and prepare for more high-level engagements. In a phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Wang Yi has emphasized that the relationship between the world's two largest economies shapes global stability and remains crucial to international expectations. Wang Yi has praised what he's called the long-standing exchanges and mutual respect between President Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, describing their relationship as a valuable strategic asset in bilateral ties. Amid renewed trade frictions over rare earths and U.S. port fees on Chinese vessels, Wang Yi has stated that the recent economic talks in Kuala Lumpur has clarified positions, improved understanding, and produced a framework consensus on key issues, including soybeans and TikTok. He's further stressed that progress requires both countries to resolve differences through dialogue rather than applying pressure. This, of course, comes ahead of an expected Xi-Trump meeting on the sidelines of the APEC CEO Summit in South Korea later this week. Rubio, meanwhile, has agreed that the U.S.-China relationship is the most consequential bilateral partnership in the world. This, according to a readout that has been put out by the U.S. Secretary of State's office. He has also stated that Washington aims to send positive signals through high-level diplomacy. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Liu. He's a strategist focusing on the Chinese economy and policy making, joining us from Hong Kong. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've been seeing this so-called back and forth going on between the United States and China, especially now in Trump's second term. Tariffs have been a key concern. Rare earth minerals, another point of contention that has come out. But in the midst of all of this, diplomatic talks continue. We've seen a conversation between Wang Yi and Marco Rubio as well. What do you think is then needed for both of these countries, the world's two largest economies, to come together and sort out their differences?
Well, what we are seeing is not just trade talks or negotiations. It's no less than a existential and historical contest between the two great powers, vying for relative influence and dominance. The United States sees China as an existential threat, as a bipartisan consensus, and then using all tools in its arsenal to thwart China's rise, whether it be on semiconductors, on trade, tariffs, allies, military encirclement in the South China Sea, Americans' allies in with Australia, Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, and so on. But the Trump administration is finding it all these tools are increasingly less effective against a more confident China, which has found a very powerful stranglehold over Americans' Achilles heel, which is, of course, China's dominance and mastery of the rare earth supply value chain. And it's now weaponizing that, it's consolidating that. And of course, that the one of President Trump's vulnerable points is dependence on China's buying or purchase of soybeans from the Midwest states, which are President Trump's main supporters. And then with the midterm elections coming up, he's very, very eager to restore this purchase, because after all, China has been the largest buyer of American soybeans. So you can see a balance of the tussle. It seems the scale is increasingly tilting towards Beijing's advantage. And of course, Beijing doesn't want to have a war, doesn't want to replace the United States. All China wants is a peaceful environment for it to grow this economy. But anyway, if both sides push the envelope too far, it could degenerate into a mutually destructive kind of confrontation. Hence, the play of China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi.
Indeed, absolutely. You've pointed towards the soybeans. In fact, that is a key concern because, as you said, Trump's majority of his voter base is in the Midwest. But meanwhile, China has now set its sights on Argentina in particular. To source its soybeans. But apart from this, TikTok has been yet another concern that the Trump administration has been raising for quite a while now. Though there is a preliminary deal, a preliminary sort of agreement that has been drafted out for now that requires formal approval, there are further concerns that lawmakers within the United States are raising as far as the algorithm of TikTok is concerned as well. Do you think this could emerge as a further sticking point?
Well, I don't think so, really, because the TikTok deal is almost signed and seal and deliver. And what has been agreed is to create a separate algorithms where the data and the privacy or even national security data are in the hands of American companies controlled by the White House. So I don't think that that's going to be a sticking point. But the main TikTok shareholders, ByteDance, of course, retains its own logarithms, and that would be the TikTok around the rest of the world. But that's got very little to do with what's happening inside the United States.
And my last question, as far as this particular theme is concerned, what are your expectations from the Trump-Xi meeting that we're expecting later this week?
I think the Trump-Xi meeting is going to be at least a reset of a temporary pause of escalating confrontations, which would, of course, be mutually destructive to the United States and China. And nobody's going to have a decisive win. But then, of course, the Trump administration, as I pointed out earlier, is discovering more and more that China possesses a great deal of resilience and a great deal of countermeasures that could hurt American badly. So I think that both sides would like to have a pause and to reset relationships. And meanwhile, the Trump administration is trying to reap the best possible benefits out of the tour, signing deals with the Asian countries, and also doubling down on Americans' alliance with Japan and South Korea and so on. But I don't think that the rivalry between the United States and China is going to be resolved at one single meeting. And the rivalry will continue because both countries are great powers. And I don't think that the United States is willing to concede too much of its dominance in the world. And there are of course, advisors and hawks in the Trump administration who still believe that they can win over China. But I think that this is increasingly proving to be a pipe dream.
All right, so requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other very crucial information. Viewers, we're now learning that Taiwan's Foreign Minister Chia-lung has now stated that he is not worried that US President Donald Trump will abandon the island during his upcoming meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea later this week. The meeting between Trump and Xi is expected to take place on the sidelines of the APEC Summit. Officials in Taipei have long feared that Taiwan's interests could be compromised during such high-level talks. However, their foreign minister has now come out and stated that Taiwan's relations with the United States will remain stable and that cooperation will continue closely in security, trade, and other areas as well. Although Washington does not have formal diplomatic ties with Taipei, it is legally required to provide defensive support to the island under the Taiwan Relations Act. Meanwhile, since taking office earlier this year, US President Trump has shifted his position several times on China and its claims over Taiwan. He had earlier stated that Chinese President Xi Jinping should not attempt any military action while he remains in office. Of course, it is also important to note that US has not approved any new arms sales for Taiwan yet. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. Thank you so much for staying on. Of course, we're tracking Taiwan's concerns as far as the Trump-Xi meeting is going to take place. It's on the anvil, of course. Speaking of Taiwan and the United States of America, for the benefit of our viewers, could you explain the United States' strategic interests in Taiwan, not just as a means or a tool to counter China, but also its deep integrated ties with the US economy?
Well, of course, both China and United States economy are interlinked in many ways, in terms of, for example, soybeans, in terms of technology, in terms of investments, and also various areas cooperation on green energy and anti-nuclear nuclearization in North Korea, for example. But as far as Taiwan is concerned, of course, this is a critical issue for Beijing. The United States has already de-recognized Taiwan as a nation, and the United Nations has also not regard Taiwan as any sovereign state, and Taiwan has always belonged to China, and this is a red line as far as Beijing is concerned. But the recent election of a Taiwan leader
Yes.
is throwing a lot of spanner in the works. Because the current leader has a long established record of separatism. But I don't think that the Trump administration want Taiwan to create too much of a problem. But neither would it abandon Taiwan, because it's a very useful ploy against China's rise. And after all, the supply of arms to Taiwan has long been established under the Taiwan Relations Act. So I don't think that Trump will sort of back away from backing Taiwan in case of any military action against the island. But I don't think that he would allow Taiwan to stir up too much of a problem for him. And I don't think he would cease selling arms to Taiwan, because after all, it's selling not the top-notch armament, but some sort of surplus, and it's making some money out of that. But at the end of the day, Taiwan remains to be a very useful ploy against the rise of China.
Absolutely. And you've spoken about the sort of domestic politics and the developments as far as the domestic political arena in Taiwan is concerned. We've recently seen Cheng Li-woon. She has now been chosen as the chairperson of the KMT. We've seen a congratulatory statement being put out by China as well. A lot of members of the KMT have been vouching for improving ties with China. They've visited China as well. So in light of this, how do you see the domestic political situation unfolding? And do you think how do you think the United States is viewing these developments?
Well, of course, that the election of this lady as the head of the Kuomintang, which is have a less confrontational stance towards Taiwan, towards Beijing. But on the other hand, I think most of the Taiwanese people, whether they support the current the Democratic Party of Taiwan, the kind of pro-independence party, or the Kuomintang, which advocates a more constructive relationship with Beijing. I think most Taiwanese people do not want unification, but nor do they want independence, because they know the consequences will be disastrous. And increasingly, a large number of them do not believe that in case war breaks out, the United States will send army or soldiers to Taiwan soil, because it's thousands of miles away. So they just want to maintain the status quo, but the status quo cannot allow to be continued forever and ever and ever, because President Xi has already made it quite clear that the absolute deadline is 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. But on the other hand, 2049 is still a long way off, and then the Taiwan people and the Chinese people on mainland are increasingly interacting with one another positively. Lots of people-to-people exchanges, tourism, investments, and even in production of films, starring Taiwanese actors and Taiwanese directors. So I think that that's what Beijing prefers as a means to, on the one hand, military coercion against any independence movements. Secondly, opening opportunities. And thirdly, promoting people-to-people exchanges to move Taiwan towards a negotiation table for the future of Taiwan under one China.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time sharing your perspectives with us on NewsX World today. Meanwhile, viewers, we're tracking some other major developments. We're now learning that China and